So welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education and Training at MEFA. And I want to welcome you to this webinar, Ask an Expert All Your CSS Profile Questions. This is fun at its best. Let me just go through a few logistics here. So you have control of your audio. So you can adjust that, and the chat feature is disabled tonight. So if you have questions, and actually that's the purpose of this, is to answer your questions, put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to those questions. If you would like a live transcript of the webinar, you can press the CC button to see the closed captioning. And if you need to leave, do so at any time, click the leave button, and we will be sending the recording and a link to the recording to you tomorrow. So let me just tell you a couple of things about MEFA. MEFA has been around since 1982, helping families plan, save, and pay for college. We have the state's college savings plans. We have low-cost loans for families who need that type of financing. And then everything else we do like this is offer free guidance to families at whatever stage you're at with this college process. So please, visit us often, come back, take advantage of any of these webinars or events, our great website, all of that. And tonight we are just thrilled to be talking about this topic, the CSS profile, with our expert, Mike Goodwin. Mike is Assistant Director of Student Financial Services at Williams College, and Williams requires the profile form. And Mike has a long history of working in higher education in so many capacities, and we'll just be able to shed a lot of light on all of your questions around this financial aid form. You can also connect with MEFA on social media. And after this, if you have questions, you can always email our collegeplanning@mefa.org or call us, and we're happy to help you and connect you. So with that, I will also tell you that my colleague, Stephanie Wells, is behind, I'm going to get rid of that, sorry, is behind the scenes, and she's also going to be able to take some of your questions. And we're going to have a conversation. So you can start typing some questions in, and I have some to start, Mike. So I guess what we know is we get a lot of questions about the CSS profile. But before we talk about that, I just want to make sure that everyone knows when you're applying for financial aid, you do need to complete the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. And all colleges require that when you're applying for financial aid. So you need to do that. And it's just that some colleges require this additional form, the CSS profile from the College Board. And if a college requires that, you need to do that as well, and by the college's deadline. So with that, I guess I'll ask Mike, maybe tell us the why. Why do some colleges require this additional financial aid form?
Sure. Julie, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate this. This is fun. I was joking. I don't know if I've ever been an expert before, so this is going to be exciting for me and share this. At Williams, we live the CSS profile and in it every day and work with families on discussing it. It makes such a big difference. So why the profile? So about somewhere, and it's funny how the numbers get changed a little bit, but somewhere between, I'd say 300, 400 colleges require the CSS profile. Colleges, universities, scholarship organizations may ask for it. And the idea is that when you fill out the FAFSA, FAFSA puts you in position for a federal student loan or a Pell Grant if you're eligible. And that's the aid the federal government offers. They take the information they gather and they share it with colleges, and colleges that only use the FAFSA will use that information to come up with whatever aid they can provide. The schools that require the CSS profile are schools that are using that information to give out their grant money. These are schools that usually have endowments, have merited opportunities, And so they're going to ask more questions, not only about your income and your assets, that's different than the FAFSA, but also where you might be spending your money. And that includes medical expenses. If you as a parent have your own college loans still you're paying on, and so on. So the idea is designed to get a deeper look into a family's economy, but that's not to say they're looking for more money. They're just trying to find a better profile of you. So when they start giving out their grant aid, they know they're doing it appropriately.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I know. So in other words, it's a good thing. It can be a very good thing, which sometimes it feels like, oh, one more form, but if it helps you receive financial aid, that's terrific. I mean, you mentioned a couple already, but can you talk about some of the questions on the CSS profile that are different than on the FAFSA, or what are some of those additional questions that the CSS profile asks?
Yep, there are a few. One of the things that CSS profile that's going to be different than FAFSA is FAFSA doesn't ask you about your home value, the home you live in, or where you own your home. They'll ask you about other property, if you have a summer home, if you have rental property. But the FAFSA doesn't ask questions about the home you live in. CSS profile will ask, do you own your home? Where's your home valued at? And what do you owe on your home? And they're kind of looking at equity, and which is a good question to ask when you're meeting with colleges and talking to their financial aid offices as you're going through this process. Ask them how they treat home equity, because some schools are going to use it as an asset. Some schools are going to treat it differently. For the most part, we don't want to punish families who have large home equity, who've been paying mortgages for 20 some odd years. They're going to ask you about your investments. They're going to ask you, as I said, medical costs that you might have accrued over the past year. That's out-of-pocket costs. If you, as a parent, has your own student loans. What's neat about the profile that I like is that it asks you. So let me back up for a second. When you fill out the CSS profile, it's just like the FAFSA. You're going to be using the 2021 information from your tax return. What's nice with the profile is that then there's a section that asks you about, well, what does 2022 look like? And you can put in your income in there as well. And then it even asks, just kind of share with us what 2023 looks like. Because what the profile tries to do is get a nice 3-year snapshot. And a college can look at that information and say, okay, this is what family earned in 2021, but we see the income went down in 2022. So that gives them now a reason to reach out to you when they send you an award and say, let's talk more about 2022. Because at the end of the day, colleges want to help you. They want to give their money to you to help out paying for college.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I think people get nervous with all the questions and oh, now we have to answer more. But I like the idea that the college wants to have that better picture so they can be more helpful. You did mention about the home equity, and one of the questions we get sometimes is what value should we use for our home? Should we use assessed value? Should we use how should we assess the value of our home?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question. The easiest answer is go to Zillow.com and put in your address and come up with a number. That number may be inflated. If you live in the Boston area, that number could be inflated. We have families who live in San Francisco, which I think is the most expensive place to live right now in the country, and they get very nervous sharing these numbers. If you have an assessed value, share it. Give it. If you have something that's more accurate, if you've had your house looked at in the past couple of years, use that number. I think where questions might arise with some schools, if you just say, my home is worth $400,000, and that's it, a round number, colleges might want more information. It all depends on the school. And then the same for what you owe. Look at your latest mortgage statement, find out what that balance is, put it in.
That's great. That's great. So I know one of the other differences between the CSS profile and the FAFSA is that if parents are divorced or separated, on the FAFSA, it's just the student and the custodial parent, how that's termed, who complete the FAFSA. But I know that many colleges who require the CSS profile would like that other parent to also complete a CSS profile. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
So, and Julie's correct. So on the FAFSA, they're asking about the household the student lives in, and that's the information you'll share. That might be changing, I think, in the FAFSA, the next couple of years, and maybe the home that the parent uses that child as a dependent on their tax return. That's change coming up down the road, I believe. The CSS profile philosophy, when we look at families that are divorced or separated, and I always feel like it's kind of crass saying this, but you can divorce a spouse, but you can't divorce your child. And so when you're divorced or separated, CSS profile is looking for information for both parents. One of the key things to keep in mind is that on the FAFSA, if the custodial parent is remarried, FAFSA is looking for information about that new spouse as well. So that because they're in that household. The CSS profile, if the parent's remarried, they're going to ask for that information, but colleges are going to exclude that new spouse on both the household and the non-custodial parent side. They're just looking at the birth parent of the child, or the adopted, I should say, parent of the child. When filling out the profile, a student will initiate the profile, will go in with their College Board ID number, which they would have from doing the SATs or some exams, and they will list who their parents are. And if their parents are married, they'll list that they're married. If they're divorced or separated, they'll signify the divorce or separated. There's a question asking for that non-custodial parent. It'll ask you which one's your custodial, which one's your non-custodial parent. It'll ask you information to contact that non-custodial parent, and they will email him or her a copy of a CSS profile for them to fill out. It's referred to as HHA, which is the custodial family home, and HHB, which is the non-custodial parent. Question that comes up quite often, both with FAFSA and the CSS profile, is what happens if both parents share custody the same? That's a 50-50 split. And the answer is always, where does the student reside most time in the year? And families will come back and say, we're 50-50 exactly. That's how we do it. I joke and I say, whoever's the last person who tied their shoe. Like it does make a difference to that point. We need to have that information because they're separate. When each parent is filling out their own CSS profile, income information is not shared. So the non-custodial parent, when they put their information, that's not going to be shared with the custodial, and vice versa. There'll be times schools might reach out to both parents and say that the custodial parent reported $15,000 in child support, and the non-custodial parent reported $40,000 in child support. So colleges might reach out to both parents individually and try to clarify that as best we can. But for the most part, we try to keep that separate. What's good about the CSS profile is that sometimes a student may not know their non-custodial parent. They may have never met them. Parents may have divorced and they've not had contact in a number of years with them. There may be situations of abuse, both physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, that it may not be safe for the student to contact that non-custodial parent. So what's available is what's called the non-custodial parent waiver form that's put out by CSS Profile. It's available on their site. And a student can go in and fill in that information as much as they can if they have on that non-custodial parent. And they'll share when's the last time they had contact. Maybe it was the holidays, maybe it hasn't been in years. And then the student will be asked to write a short narrative, a short couple paragraphs of what does that relationship look like. And that's a chance for a student to share why they no longer have this relationship with this non-custodial parent. And then with that, the form asks for a third-party letter, someone who can verify that this non-custodial parent is not part of the student's life. Can't be his mother or father, can't be a parent, but it can be a clergy member, a school teacher, counselor, coach, I have just this week, I've been working with a student. Her godmother wrote the letter, and that, that gives the college another set of eyes or opinion on the situation that can verify the situation for the student.
Yeah, and that's so helpful because, yeah, we get that question a lot too, that students need to know they have another option if they really do not have contact with that other parent. I'm going to push you a little bit on another point, because we get this question as well, and I had it just this week. What if there's the other parent that still does have some contact, but really is refusing to be a part of this college process? So much so that the custodial parent wouldn't even want to put this person's name on the initial form, on the profile, thinking that wouldn't be looked upon favorably. So what any advice about that? So it's not a situation of no contact and abuse, but just really a situation of one parent not wanting to participate in this. How does that work?
Yeah, and that can be a difficult situation. My advice to all families in that situation, that are students in the situation, is contact the colleges that you're applying to, and share this. I work with a lot of prospective students who are applying to Williams, and that this comes up often in talking with one parent, because the student might have a relationship with the parent, but the custodial parent does not have a relationship with a non-custodial parent. And there's a lot of issues for that aren't abuse or whatever, just we don't talk. My guess is that colleges is going to be similar to ours, and we'll tell the parent or the student, have that parent reach out to us and let us have that conversation. We will, professionals in an office will kind of get their own read on what's going on. If that parent doesn't come through and doesn't reach out to us and doesn't return the profile and doesn't participate whatsoever, the colleges will make a professional judgment on their part in their office to decide maybe we just need to waive this parent. It's, it is the philosophy of the College Board, is that it's the parent's primary responsibility to pay for college. And we often tell families that, I don't want to pay is not an excuse to not have to pay. But we know there's situations where it's really hard. I've been fortunate with a lot of non-custodial parents and having the conversation once they realize, what the process looks like. What's nice, and we probably will talk about this later, Julie, but every college should have a net price calculator on their website. And sometimes when that non-custodial parent actually looks at using the calculator and puts in their income and their assets, and they see what the college may cost themselves, then they may, hopefully get a second look at things secondary and want to participate. I will share, and I feel like this is me, what's the other side of this that gets unfortunate sometimes, is the non-custodial parent does participate and they fill out the form and they have a contribution, but then do not fulfill that contribution. They don't, and so now the student and the custodial parent are stuck with that higher contribution because we're counting both. So that's where you really want to make partners with the financial aid offices at your colleges, and talk this through with them.
Oh, that's so helpful. So helpful. Before I have lots of questions, so before I keep going, I just want to really encourage others. I know you have questions because you've been calling, and so please type your questions into the Q&A. And I'll just ask my colleague, Steph, can you see any questions?
Yeah, there's a ton that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, there's a ton.
Great. Okay. So I'll stop and let you ask a couple because I can't see them, Steph. So that would be great.
Okay, yeah, there's a ton. A lot of them are very specific that we probably can't answer tonight because it's so specific, but I'll just throw out one that came up that I think is good to get started with. Is let me just find it here because it's almost 30 questions in here, and so we're gonna try and do our best to get through them all tonight, folks, but just bear with us. It's just me behind the scenes. So let me just find it here. I just had it. Hold on. It was a question about, the comparison between the CSS profile and the FAFSA and why you might need to submit both. What they're both for.
Yeah. So, and I think this is funny because I was looking at some websites, and I think sometimes it gets kind of incorrectly explained. You don't have to fill out both. Look at the school that you're applying to on their website, and it'll tell you if they're requiring the CSS profile along with the FAFSA. If that's the case, you don't get to choose to do one or the other. You're going to do both because you want to be in place for a student loan if you need one. And colleges also want to have access to that information when they're looking at putting together your package. So if you want to see if the college requires a CSS profile, and then you're going to fill out both. I'll stop there with that one, I think. Yep.
Yeah, I think, and then the question was also, how do they coordinate the CSS profile and the FAFSA to determine grants?
Nope. Colleges will look at that information. Remember, the FAFSA is just gathering your information to share with colleges. And again, a lot of state institutions, a lot of small schools rely on the FAFSA for that information to give their grant aid when they look at that expected family contribution. The CSS profile information is, I can speak for Williams. That's the information that we're using to put the grant stuff, grants and such together. But what's important is that a student may be eligible for $7,000 Pell Grant, federal Pell Grant, which is great. And so now the college can reduce the amount of grant they're going to give because they know that money's coming in. And colleges like that because now they can use that $7,000 on another family someplace else. So they kind of work together that way, but the two do not communicate whatsoever. And I think real quick, I'll just share, when you fill out the FAFSA, there's an opportunity to use the data retrieval tool, the DRT, which you press that button and the Department of Education talks to the IRS and pulls all your information over and fills out your form for you. The CSS profile doesn't have that relationship with the Department of Education or the IRS. And so you put that information in yourself. And so that's just another example of the two do not work together in tandem that way. And you do need to fill out both separately.
Great. And we have, so many questions coming in. We won't be able to get to them all tonight, but can you talk about, we have a lot of questions about the CSS profile waiver request for the non-custodial parent. Some specific questions about concerns, if there's things colleges are looking for that waiver and they don't have access, will that hurt the student? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. No, I think, there's a couple ways I look at the waivers, and I've usually in the past, I've done the bulk of the waivers. So I've read these and read the letters and stuff, and it's heartbreaking sometimes. You can imagine some of these stories. When you fill out the college is looking for information, so whatever you have to share is helpful. I think we want to all be cautious of not re-traumatizing a student who's experienced a very emotional event with a parent. And so we ask, students to give us information you're comfortable sharing, and we're looking, it's a fine line. And the idea is share what you're comfortable sharing. We've read enough of these to kind of be able to read between the lines. Just don't leave the lines too broad for us. And I think, the key part of this is that third-party letter. And quite honestly, a lot of letters are from a guidance counselor or a teacher or a coach who says, since the student's been in high school, we've had no contact with a non-custodial parent. It's really that kind of simple. That's really what we're looking for. I think, it's every family has its own story. And I want to be cautious of, telling your story as much as you're comfortable sharing with us. If it gets to a point that you'd rather talk with someone about it, you can call an office, the schools you're applying for, and kind of explain to them your situation, and they will put a note in your file and say, here's additional information to go with the waiver form.
Great, thank you, Mike. I have a couple really quick, easy ones, I think. Is there a way to print the CSS profile before submitting it, or otherwise check your answers without going through entire sections, one part at a time?
So what's interesting about the profile is that they've redone it this year. So it's in little bite-sized pieces. And so you're really going to like a one box and answering a question or two, and then going to a next box, question or two. There is the opportunity to go back into different spots and change it. I don't, it's a good question. I don't know if you can print it out. I know it, before you submit it, it lists out, I think before you submit it, I believe it lists out all your answers, all the questions, and you can click to make a change. Once you submit the CSS profile, you're given one opportunity to make a correction. So you can go back in after it's been submitted and say, you know what? I forgot to report a house that we own on Cape Cod, or I forgot to report that the student's grandmother lives in our home and I didn't count them. So you can go in and make that change, and you can do that once. If there's changes beyond that, again, you're going to want to contact the schools you're applying to and share that with them. And I would say, the schools that your student is serious about applying to, or even after they're in and they have their package, you can always follow up again and say, you know what, we didn't discuss grandmother who's living with us as well.
Great. And here's a quick, easy one. Should they count a graduate student as a sibling in college on the profile?
Nope. That's a no. We get that quite often. When the CSS profile asks about number in the family, you can include children up to 26 years old, and they can be counted in the family. But in terms of going to college, a number in college has to be an undergraduate program. Graduate school does not count.
Okay, great. And a couple questions about making about if something changes. So two, they're similar but different. So how do you update the CSS profile if a student's citizenship status changes? Is it possible to update that information for future colleges? So maybe if you submitted it once, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, if you submitted it once, you can go back and make a correction, and that's a correction you want to make. After that, you're going to want to contact the schools that you're applying to or been admitted to and have that conversation with them.
Great. And then if a student has gone through a recent name change, so it's legalized with the probate court, but not verified with Social Security Administration just yet, should they be filling out this FAFSA and profile with their new name or their birth name? And it says here that they've applied to the colleges with their new name, the student's new name. So use their birth name on the forms, or?
That's a good question. I know on the profile, it allows you to put your name and then preferred name. So I'm Michael and I use Mike. This is different for a lot of different reasons. That's a good question. And, I say, and I probably shouldn't say this, but it's unfortunate you're doing this while you're applying for financial aid, because FAFSA, we had a situation today that a student applied under one name and then she went to sign a promissory note for a loan and she's putting it the wrong name, and something happened. We can't quite figure out what it is. And she has to go back now through her studentaid.gov site and make changes and work on some of these things. I think, again, I know you can make one correction. I would go through the whole process with a college, acceptance, get your award, and then have a conversation with the college, which is going to be the admissions office, financial aid office, and the registrar's office, to make known and have the legal papers in place about the name change. That might be the easiest way to do that.
Keep the birth name on the forms for now.
Yeah, I'd keep the birthday, especially when for the FAFSA, where that's federal information.
Yeah,
you want to kind of keep that as straight as possible.
Great, that's a good answer. Great. I have a bunch, Julie. Should I keep going, or you tell me?
Yeah, can I ask one too? I just want to get one in that, because this is just one that we get this question a lot. So I just want to make sure I get this one in there. The question on the CSS profile that asks, how much will you contribute to your son or daughter's education, right? After, they're submitting all of the details of data, but then there's that question. And I think there's a second one too, about how much will other relatives, contribute. And people always call and say, what should I put there? So, because in other words, they think, well, you're going to tell me, but why? So can you talk about that a little bit? Because we get that a lot.
I was afraid you're going to ask that question too.
No.
So let's start with the parent contribution. It does ask, what is the parent expected to pay? I'll share that I work at a very expensive college, and I have a family that writes $2,000. And by the time we're done looking at that, and they're not going to get any because they make too much money, they're not going to get any aid. We sit back and we kind of chuckle. I think that the question is really put in place for a couple of reasons. One is just to kind of get you thinking about, what am I going to be paying for college and what am I comfortable with paying? Two, it gives your colleges kind of a sense when they come up with your award, and they can look at that number, and if they're close on, then that's a good feeling. If it's a way off, then it kind of prepares the office that this family may come back with more information or not, I'm not happy with that. I think when you answer that question, it's not, my understanding is no college is going to take that number and use it, or take that number and not give you aid because it's so far off. And you put a number you think that makes sense, that you're when you look at your budget, when you look at your savings, you look at what you're willing to borrow, what that number would look like. The grandparents, other people, money to share. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the school. Some schools might use that as part of their decision making. We don't at Williams. I'm going to share with the 200 whatever number of people, my good friends now. I'd be very judicious in sharing that information. I really would, unless that grandmother has set aside so much money that's directly for college, and you're confident in that, and you want to share that. And that's good. We want families to be honest and to share. But I think if it's a matter of, geez, we're expecting, we're hoping, we're planning to get $5,000 from grandmother or grandfather or uncle or whoever it might be, you don't need to share that. I'd be hesitant to do so. Now I'm going to jump ahead because I know this may be another question that's going to come up. The profile asks assets and siblings' name. So if your student has a younger brother or older brother who has assets, the profile is asking you, how much assets do they have? So say if little Johnny, the brother, has got $3,000 in lawn mowing money he saved over the summers, you're not going to report that because that's little Johnny's money and that's his savings. But if you have a 529 college savings plan that you've been contributing to for a number of years, you're going to share that amount because that's the assets thing that they're looking at and will want to know.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I'm sure
Good.
A lot of people are happy to get your guidance on that. Thank
Good.
you. So Steph, keep going. I just wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Yeah, sure. I have a quick one about the cost associated with the profile form. Can you provide more detail about that?
Yep, that's a great question. So the profile, to submit a profile, costs $25. Okay, so that's the submission fee. And I should know this. I think that's, they'll send that information to a college or so many colleges. I really should know this. And then $16 for every additional college after that.
Yep.
So I know like my kids, when they're applying for schools, they're looking at 10, 12 colleges. That adds up. What the profile does is for families who make $100,000 or less, that fee is waived. So you don't have to pay that fee. $100,000 or more, and that's because they'll ask you in the form, how much do your family earn? And they'll look at that number and it'll tell you automatically as you're filling out the form, at the end, it'll say you qualify for a fee waiver form, a free fee waiver rather. And so then you don't have to pay that $25 or more to send it off.
No, that's great. And I will sometimes say to people, Mike, that it's, even though it can get costly with 10 to 12 schools, it's so worth it for the possibility of the level of scholarship and grant monies that could be awarded. So
Yeah,
it's worth it, even though it can be a lot. Yeah.
And my admissions friends would say, when we look at your reach schools, typically those are the schools that are going to ask for the CSS profile, but they're going to have the endowment money to help grant money to help, pay. So sometimes it is worth it. Yep.
Thanks.
So here's one that we get a lot. Why do they ask about retirement plans on the profile?
I love that question. That's a very good question. So when we look at your assets, we're looking at your money in the bank, checking savings accounts. We talked about home equity. If you have other property, other real estate, that's an asset. We'll look at the equity in that as well. And then your investments. A 529 college savings plan is an investment. So you have to report that full amount for all your children. The reason the profile asks about retirement is that sometimes families can confuse my qualified investments, which is retirement, and my non-qualified investments, which are your other outside stocks and such. And so remember the profile is trying to get a full profile, full picture of a family's economy, what can they afford and so on. And one of the things they will look at, and I'll speak for Williams, when we look at our aid, we will often look at what's this family have saved for retirement. And if it's not, at a number that we might think is be adequate for their age or whatever, that can have some input in decisions that we make. But the most important thing is that we want to make sure families are separating their retirement investments from their outside investments. I do a lot of the net price calculator work with our families, and they fill it out and they have $800,000 in investments. And I'll ask them, how much of that is any of that retirement? And they go, yeah, $800,000. And so we pull that out, and all of a sudden their number is very much different that they're going to pay once we do that. So the profile wants to really make sure you understand to separate the two.
So really, in a way, if I'm hearing you that putting their retirement on this form is more likely to help them than to hurt them. I know people feel nervous about putting those numbers, but it's really there to help.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And again, we want that full picture. Now, I don't know, again, I can only imagine what these questions are, but I'll jump ahead to add a little bit more to this. When you're filling out the profile, it asks you to have your W-2 form with you. And so in your W-2, it's going to ask you, what did you earn in 2021? And that's going to be box 1 of your W-2, okay? Later on, it's going to ask about untaxed income. And untaxed income includes things like child support and some other items, but the important item is your pre-taxed retirement contribution, which on your, and I'm not going to get too much into this right now, but on your W-2, it's box 12. And box 12, you can see a bunch of different letters with a bunch of different numbers. And colleges are looking for letters D, E, F, G, H, S, which all have different amounts tied to them that are telling us that you get paid. Box 1 is your taxed amount, but we know you have a pre-taxed amount that you're putting right towards retirement. So for a lot of families, that might be $3,000. I know the maximum is going to be up to $26,000 soon. I have a father who's in California, a school teacher, a great guy, but he's putting $60,000 away in pre-tax income towards his retirement, because in California, he can do that. And so when we did the calculator, we got two very different numbers. And the idea is need to be aware of that and know that, because that is something that schools are going to add back. And so it goes into your retirement. Once it's in your retirement, we're not going to touch it. But before it gets there, we do look at a number, because that's still income.
That's great. Super helpful.
Great. Can you talk, Mike? I have a few related questions that I'm going to try and sum up to help answer a few at once. About assets, there's tons of questions here about assets. Is it that, do you count the same number of assets as the FAFSA at 5.64%? And how much, I have questions about whether they have to submit answers to questions that aren't required about assets. So a bunch of questions about assets, if you want to just talk about it in generalities. About
Sure. Yep. So before I talk about assets, let's talk a little bit about income. When we're, and because you kind of alluded to this, Stephanie, when we're putting together that parent contribution, we're looking at roughly, and these numbers vary wherever you may look, but somewhere between 10 to 20% of a family's income. And we're taking that number. And that number varies because the number in the household, your zip code where you might live, if you have younger siblings and being able to save money for their education, all these things kind of play in that 10 to 20%. Assets, we're looking at somewhere between 3 to 5% of your assets with the College Board. So the College Board, when they put together their, you fill out the application, we get that information and we will do our work with it and come up with your financial aid award. But there are algorithms that are written into this whole process that look at protecting your income, again, your zip code, saving for a child's education, being able to put money towards your retirement. All these numbers come into it. So we come up, and that affects that assets as well. That's why it's 3 to 5%. So I would never say it's a specific number. It really depends on your family and everything else. But we take that 10 to 20%, that number that you come up with, and that 3 to 5% of your assets, we add that together, that's your parent contribution. So what assets are we looking for? As we said earlier, your savings, checking accounts, savings accounts, investments, outside investments, home equity, other real estate property. If you own a business, that's your business, you own the business, the assets of that business are your assets. So there's a part of the CSS profile that asks you if you own a business and to share that information, which remind me, because we're going to talk about hopefully the IDOC, the IDOC in a bit. And so you're going to look at your business taxes and what is your value of your business and report that as well, because that is still an asset as well. We don't care about your car. Like, you don't have to, unless a college specifically asks for it. We're not asking for a value of your car or your lawnmower or whatever. Looking at those, the property piece is what we will consider an asset.
Great. I'll try and find, I know we had some questions about IDOC, so I'll try and find those, but can you also clarify who the parents are on the CSS profile and the non-custodial profile? We have some questions about that. I think there's a misunderstanding that the spouse of the biological parents don't have to be reported, but I believe that's.
Yep. So I will say that they have to be reported. So when you fill the CSS profile, the student's going to fill in the information of who is in their household. So it might be the student, and in this case, we'll say the mother, and the mother remarried, so now the stepfather, and then any children might live in the home, including, maybe stepchildren from the previous marriage of the new spouse. And so what we'll do is, and same thing with the non-custodial parent, if they're remarried, the parent, the non-custodial parent, the new spouse, and family members. So what we want that information, because you're going to share, we'll talk about the IDOC when you share your tax forms with us. The tax return is going to have, if the parent is remarried, it's going to have their income on line 1. And so we want to see the parent and the step parent's income, so we can make sure we can divide out that and take out the step parent's income and just work with the parent's information. If they have shared dividends and income from investments, savings, for the most part, we're going to split that 50-50. When we look at assets, if they own a home together, we'll separate that 50-50 unless a parent shares with us on the form that the home belongs to the new step parent, or the home belongs to the parent, or whatever. It can be kind of confusing. I think you just need to go through it, slowly. And each question has a box that, will try to answer questions which can be helpful. When we look at siblings, so say parents are divorced and they had 3 children, both parent gets to we'll give them credit for having 3 children. Okay, so they both get credit for having children. If a student lives with the mother's remarried and has children with the new spouse, that child's still counted in the household because it's the mother's child and student sibling. If the family's remarried and the new spouse comes in with their own children, we don't count them in that household because it's the other spouse's children from that marriage, and he can do his own thing with his own previous spouse and their CSS profile and FAFSAs and such. It sounds confusing. I'll probably make it more difficult than I need to, but the idea is that we want that information and then we will separate it out as best we can using your W-2s and your information you share with us.
Yeah.
Is that helpful, Stephanie? Does that make sense, Julie?
It does. I think, yeah, you want it all, but you make adjustments to be fair.
To be fair. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Mike, did you want to talk about IDOC now and how,
Yeah.
Yep.
what families would use that for?
Yep. So remember what we talked about the FAFSA and how you can use the data retrieval tool for the Department of Education, which FAFSA comes out of, to speak with the IRS, and it pulls all your tax information over and fills out your FAFSA form, which is great. The CSS profile doesn't have that relationship with the federal government. So you're going to fill out your CSS profile, and when you're filling it out, you're going to sit with your 2021 tax return, the entire tax return, all the schedules, everything, and your W-2s. And you'll answer questions based on that information. Once you finish filling out everything and you submit your CSS profile, it'll mention, and I can't remember how it notifies you. Either you get an email the next day or sometime afterwards that asks you to now upload these documents, your tax returns, your W-2, all the schedules, into what's called IDOC, IDOC, which I always have to write this down. It's the Institutional Document Service. So IDOC. And what you do is you'll log into the IDOC using your student's College Board financial aid ID number, which you'll have at that point. And you'll use either his or hers social security number or his or hers birthday to log in. And then it'll give you a list of items that you need to share. And you will upload into this IDOC service. You'll share the colleges that you're applying to. They have a code number, and you'll put it in. And if you don't have the code number, you can find the college and it'll give it to you anyway. But you'll upload your tax information. You will not, please do not, don't ever hard mail your tax documents to your colleges that you're choosing unless they request it. Because we've moved past paper now. We don't have those filing systems any longer. And we don't want to deal with that. So if your tax return, all this information is only in hard copy, go to a Staples or someplace or somewhere and make copies of it, electronic copies, so you can upload these to the IDOC. If you own a business, so say those who are familiar with your taxes, if you have a small business and you fill out a Schedule C, which is for small businesses. My wife owns a small business. She does a Schedule C. That's going to be part of your tax return, your schedules. If you own a business that's more like a partnership or a corporation, that information is on your Schedule E. But each business has its own tax return. So if you have a partnership, it's a 1065. If you're a sole proprietor, it's an 1120S. Your tax return, your tax people, your HR block, your auditor, your accountants, they'll explain all this to you if you have that. But you're going to want to share those as well, because we're looking for that information. And then remember, each of these are their own tax returns. You're going to have what's called a K1, which is basically your business versions of a W-2 that says how much you made from the business. So you're going to share that as well. If you don't own a business, don't worry about anything I just said. But the idea is that this is how you're going to send this information to us so we can verify all the information you shared on your CSS profile. And we'll have it in a file with your student's ID number. It'll all be there. The non-custodial parent will do the same thing, submit theirs. All that information will be together in the student's file. But remember, we will never share that information with either parent.
Great. Do you want me to keep going, Julie, or do you have something that you
Yeah,
wanna-
keep going. I have a couple more, but you keep going and then
Okay.
we'll.
Sounds good.
I
So
got
we
all
have a
night.
bunch of questions about making changes to the profile. Do you have to email the admissions officer, or where do you do that? What if you make a mistake? Can you fix it later? So a lot of questions like that.
Yep. So one thing we didn't talk about before we get into changes, I guess, is what's nice with the CSS profile, which is different than the FAFSA, is it gives you a spot called special circumstances. So that box for special circumstances, that's going to be part of the application process, is a place where you can go in and share information that your tax returns just aren't going to be able to share. That means, like, I lost a business. My spouse has been ill for the past year. Excuse me. I lost my job. My business was affected by COVID this year. And it kind of gives you a chance to explain what's happening in your current world. Because remember, we're looking at 2021 taxes, again, a year or two ago. So utilize that special circumstance place so you can share what you want to share with your financial aid offices. If you've made that one correction already on your CSS profile and you need to share information with the school, you're not going to contact the admissions office. You're going to contact the financial aid office or student financial services office. They're the people. In most cases, the student's going to be assigned a counselor. A lot of these changes and such, are going to be more helpful after your student's been accepted and has an award, as opposed to beforehand, because we're also busy getting information through our system that we're not going to have a chance to make any changes or give it the attention it deserves. So you want to wait until your student is accepted and you have your financial aid award, and then you can go back. And what's interesting about this, and I know Julie and Stephanie do a session in the spring on this, on comparing awards. This is where it gets fun, because you can have 3 awards from, Framingham State, Dean College, Williams College, all 3 different numbers. And you might have a change or something else has happened to you recently. And you can, because you're the customer, you can interview each of these colleges and ask them how they would treat this change. And that can be very helpful. And so I would definitely take advantage of that. But any major changes you want to share, wait until your student's been accepted and you have that award.
That's great. That's great.
Excellent. Go ahead, Julie, if you have one that you want to mention.
Well, just another question that we seem to get a lot, or this year I've been getting a lot, is when it's asking about income, it takes income information from your tax return. And then there tends to be another question later on about wages. And people just are always asking, why do I have to write it twice? I mean, that they say it about the FAFSA, but also on the CSS profile, why am I answering income? And then why am I answering other questions about wages from the W-2, wages, salary?
It's funny. I did the CSS profile yesterday, just kind of get familiar with it, because it's been a while since I've seen it. They made changes. And I'll tell you, at the beginning, they asked me for all my information. I filled out like I'm a student, and I put in my parents' name and had all the right birth years and did all that. And it created my account. Then I go to the CSS profile and I had to answer all the same questions all over again. And I think that's just, that's like filling out forms for anything. If you've ever bought a car, you sign your name 7 times and you answer all the same questions and so on. So that's a big part of it. When we ask you for your wages, again, you're looking at your W-2 box 1. That's the wages for individual parents. Some parents might have 2 or 3 W-2s, and you add those up for that one parent, second parent. When I ask for your total wages for a married couple, you're using that line 1 from the tax return. What's nice, if you look at your W-2, if you're a geek like I am, and you look at these things, If you look at box 5 on your W-2, you'll see for the most part that number is going to be higher than box 1. And that's because it includes your pre-tax retirement usually. That's what they're basing your Social Security benefits and your Medicare benefits off of, that box 5. So when we go through the process of looking at a family's income and putting it in our system, we always double check that box 5 to make sure our family's getting the most credit for their Medicare and Social Security, even more than they may be getting, because that's just being fair. If you are a family that files a Schedule C, you're self-employed and you're paying a self-employment tax, we'll use those numbers as well, because we want to make sure you get the most benefit. So to answer the question, why you ask the same question? One reason, I think, it's just their secret way of making sure you're answering everything correctly and you're double checking, but also because different aspects of the profile are going to be used for different things. And so it's just their way of kind of parceling it out. So this is going to be used for this item. This is going to be used for a different item. That's the way I would look at that.
That's a good, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Do you want me to go next, Julie?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Can you talk, I have a bunch of questions about non-custodial parents. So can you talk, Mike, just a little bit about that process? And what happens if the non-custodial parent, even though they're legally required to pay support or, divorce agreements, what have you, what if there's a refusal to pay?
Yep. So, yeah, and this is where it gets difficult. And I know my job gets difficult, but even more difficult for a family. So again, a student's going to get into the CSS profile. He's going to list, he or she, forgive me. I have 2 daughters, I think I would know this. They're going to list out who their parents are. And they'll ask, tell us about your parents. Are they married, divorced, separated, never married, as the other option. And so if we know if the student obviously has 2 parents, we want information as much as we can get on both. So the custodial parent, the student will fill out their form with the custodial parent. And then when they list their non-custodial parent, they're going to ask information about an email or a phone number. I think it may just be an email and maybe an address. And then the CSS profile, will reach out to that parent, non-custodial parent, and say, your student is applying for financial aid using the CSS profile, and we need your information. More times than not, non-custodial parents are going to fill it out. And again, if there's a concern that the parent, it's not a safe relationship, the parent may be incarcerated, whatever the issue might be, I've never met them. That's the non-custodial waiver form that the family can fill out. So oftentimes parents come back and say, we have a divorce agreement. The custodial parent is paying for college. I don't have to pay for college. We don't care. I'll be very, very crass, open about it. We don't care, because the philosophy of the CSS profile is it's the parent's responsibility to pay. What 2 divorced parents might have agreed upon in a divorce agreement is between those parents. We still want that information from both parents, and we're going to come up with that. The custodial parent contribution will come up with a non-custodial parent contribution, and then you'll see it in the award letter. Will say, the combined family contribution is $20,000. Custodial parent owes $15,000, and non-custodial owes $5,000. Just as an example, how the family decides to pay for that is up to the family. We're not going to force the non-custodial. We can't do that. That's where it can become difficult. And more times than not, a financial aid office will listen to the family situation and what's going on and do our best to try to accommodate. But we're not going to, the student, remember, we probably should have said this earlier, and I apologize. Your student is the adult at the college. The college will treat him as an adult. Your student will get the bill, and the bill will be shared with parents. If you're signed up to receive the bill too, that's great. but you get one bill. College may divvy out what custodial parent owes, what non-custodial parent owes, but the families, combined families, they're responsible for the bill. How it gets paid is going to be up to the family. I feel like I could go on and on about this because it's difficult, and we deal with this quite a bit. And we have students who are juniors and seniors who are still trying to figure this out. And I've many times have sat down with the family, and we've in our committees and decided we need to release the non-custodial parent from this because it's really hurting the family. And that's where we honestly see family get into loan debt because a non-custodial, one of the parents will not fulfill their obligation. So now the student needs to borrow beyond what they should be borrowing.
Great.
That creates an issue.
Very helpful.
Thank you, Mike. And then just a little bit more on the non-custodial parent side. So flipping it to a not an unwillingness to pay, but the parent is not in the picture for whatever reason, could be a number of different reasons, and it's a legitimate, reason to ask for a non-custodial waiver form.
Mhm.
So how should they go about doing that? What sort of information should school counselors provide to help them through that process to get a waiver? Because there's
Sure.
concerns in the questions that the profile is asking for the non-custodial parents' phone number and address, and they're concerned about contact that wouldn't be healthy for the student.
Yep. And that's what the non-custodial waiver form is for. It's on when you're finishing up the CSS profile. There are a list of different forms. One's called a verification form where you list everybody who lives in the household and so on. But one of the forms is going to be the non-custodial waiver form. So you should be able to find it there. The schools that you're applying to, look at their websites. And gosh, you can just Google CSS profile non-custodial waiver form. It's going to be there too. So it's accessible for anybody. I think it's not a bad idea for a student maybe to sit with a guidance counselor, and because ideally a guidance counselor is going to have a sense of the student's family and fill it out with them, and then let the custodial parent know they're doing this. And then again, there's that space where the student can share their story. That's important, and I think we need, if I receive these and they sit, no, I don't like my father. That's not going to be enough to do that. But if it's, I've never met my father, or my father left when I was 2 years old, and so on, then that's going to help, because now we have that situation, that information. But again, what can a guidance counselor do? That third party letter from the guidance counselor verifying this is important.
No, that's great. And I guess we're a little over time. So Steph, if there are a couple more questions, we can answer those. We can follow up with any questions that we haven't been able to get to, but that I don't want to keep Mike too long. And I guess what I want to say to everyone too is I hope you're feeling the same way I'm feeling is Mike, you put a very human face to this whole financial aid process. And so I know completing forms online can be stressful. You're sitting at your computer, you're probably tired doing it at night, and it's stressful. But if you can sort of see how this works, what happens to your data when it gets to the college, you have real human beings who want to help your student at the other end of this, and super reasonable. So, try to be as accurate, share as much as you can, and then you can continue to have those conversations going forward, as Mike said, even afterwards when your student is admitted. So I will say, Steph, if you have one or two more questions, and then we'll end. But I hope everyone really got that message clearly, because I certainly feel that way, and I thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Julie, if you want to, I'll throw out another question. But if you want to put up the slide with the email and phone number,
I
just
will.
so folks know that they can email us. We will definitely try to reach out to folks if they shared their information about who was asking the question. We
Yeah.
can also
Stephanie,
get through
Julie-
those tomorrow if we weren't able to get to them tonight.
That's
But
great.
please, I just
can I throw a
encourage folks
shameless,
to call us or email us.
can I throw out a shameless plug really quick as we
Sure,
do that?
absolutely.
So I'm fortunate to work with one of Julie's colleagues in coordinating what's called FAFSA Day, which is part of the Massachusetts Financial Aid Professionals Organization. And we have sessions throughout the upcoming months. FAFSAday.org, you can find our website, but we have a Gmail account, fastfaday@gmail.com. And I'm, every week going through that. So I'm happy to answer questions on that as well. So by all means, utilize your resources. MEFA, it's a huge resource. Guidance counselors, FAFSA Day, by all means, and our offices. Call the offices of the schools you're applying to, get admitted to, work us hard, build that relationship. I got to share, I love to talk, but I got to share the story.
Right.
I had a conversation today with a father who we met when their daughter was visiting, and he called me today and he goes, I know you've had 1,000 conversations, but it was a good conversation, really liked it and made a big difference. And he shared today that his wife is undergoing cancer treatment and it's changing their income and making a huge difference. But it's a relationship that he felt he had with me in our office, that he could call and talk about that. And I think, that's rewarding for us in our field, is know that families trust us and can share and will come to us with these situations, because we want to help. The bottom line for every office you apply to, we want to help you be able to get your education.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
What you got, Stephanie? You got another one?
I'll just throw out one more just because we had a couple related questions to this. We had one question asking about international students and whether, they would be filling this out. And I also had a little bit more of a specific question about how to report the information of a parent who is a non-resident alien and lives and works in a different country.
Mm-hmm. So what's great about CSS Profiles is designed to help families like this. FAFSA, if you're not a citizen, U.S. citizen, you can't apply for FAFSA. If you're international, obviously you can't apply for using FAFSA. CSS Profile is designed to be used by international students or students who may be American, but their parents either are not or work out of country. When you go into the CSS Profile, you'll share you're an international student, and it'll take you on that track and ask you those questions. What's great about the profile is they put a lot of time, College Board and the CSS Profile put a lot of time into looking into conversion rates and cost of living in different countries. And so all that is tweaked already for colleges as we go through your information. A family whose undocumented parents are going to put all zeros in for the Social Security number. But if they're earning and they have income and such, you're going to share that just like any other family would. Families families who are international or parents work international, they will share whatever they have for income information. Not all countries do tax returns or have W-2 equivalents. But the profile provides information for us to work through that. Canadian families are very similar to US families, so that's easy to do. I have a colleague who works only with internationals. And that's huge relief for me because it can get complicated, but it's rewarding because we can make a difference for these families, obviously. And I think every college looks at it that way. Thank
you, Mike. Okay, one last one. And this is a combo of a couple people asked a similar question. So I'll just combine them. Does the CSS profile have to be submitted every year? And what is the timing on submitting the profile? So when do you submit it?
Yep, that's a great question. I'll answer the second part first. That's going to be up to your college. Anything FAFSA, CSS profile, if you haven't heard 100 times, you'll hear it. Look at your deadlines. One of the deadlines to get it in. It's easy to be late and miss deadlines and then not receive any aid because colleges they have their set amount that they can use. So filling out the profile is going to be based on your college. At Williams, we ask students to start doing it now to get it in. and a big important part of that is that colleges are going to want it in early because we all want to take vacation during the summer. So we don't want to be doing this all over the summer. So if we can get this done in the spring, all the better. So to the first part of the question, again, it depends on the college. Some schools just want it once and that's it. Others will, like Williams, ask for it every single year. So you're going to want to ask that question at every college, look at their website, and they'll tell you. You might have college ask the CSS profile, but your income is such that they're only going to ask for the FAFSA. And you may not have to do the profile because your income meets a qualification that we don't need it. So check with the colleges and we'll get an understanding what their requirements are.
Great. I think that's a good place to end, Julie. And I'll just reiterate, that I know there was a few questions we didn't get to, but we will answer those tomorrow via email if you listed your name on the question. And if you were not able to get your question answered and you still need help, feel free to call us or email us directly tomorrow.
That's great. And I also put the FAFSAday@gmail.org. Is that correct, Mike? I put that in the chat to everyone.
I think it's gmail.com.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Google's not an organization. They're
Right. Right. Okay,
Yep.
good.
But FAFSA FAFSAday.org is our website.
Oh, right. Okay. So FAFSAday@gmail.com is another. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. This was so helpful.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Good
And
luck
thank
to all
you,
the
everyone.
families. Enjoy this journey. It's a lot of fun. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. This is
Everyone have a
great.
good evening.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.